So a while ago, I made a video and it was around things you should do, to improve your grip or things you should watch out for that might be destroying your grip, particularly when it comes to weapons, of course, being the grip in this case. So the reason I made that back then and the reason I'm doing this right now is as I'm progressing forward and as I'm kind of adding more scope to how Kempo can utilize more of the Filipino style stick work in its techniques to improve certain things or just to improve its weapon work overall. One of the things that I do come across occasionally is videos from a while ago of senior people in Kempo teaching sticks. Now, admittedly, they are teaching Kempo storms or stick techniques, Parker stick techniques more so, and they're looking at it from that lens or through that lens. One of the things I do want to watch out for there, however, is there are some serious problems with a lot of what's being taught in some cases, and two in particular that I'm going to address in this video. So the first thing is the length of the weapon. Okay, a lot of people say it's not about size, but sometimes it is. The length of the weapon is an important part of, why you're using a weapon first off. So again, grip wise, what I've seen in these individuals' videos is they're leaving about maybe 6 to 7 inches on either side or on the end here and using the stick in this way to do their Kempo techniques. Now, even for me demonstrating with this length of stick right now, I find that extremely awkward to be hitting with. It's not to say I can't punch with a stick. It's not to say that I can't use it at close range with proper body mechanics, but I'm not really using the full extent of the lever here either. That's the other thing we need to be careful of. So again, it depends on the range that we're at first off. But the main thing is in doing so, you do choke up on your ability to use the stick effectively to the full extent of its length. However, for Kempo, just to call it out, while the stick is about this length, a standard rattan stick, Eskrima, Kali, whatever you want to call it, for Kempo purposes, our club set, or Form 7, as we do, our double sticks, usually the measurements I've heard have been from elbow to fingertips. So that would equate to about where we're seeing people gripping the stick in Kempo, because we're talking about a club of about this length as opposed to a full Eskrima length stick at this point. So one of two things is happening there. People are not using the appropriate length stick or club for the form itself. And, a quick fix to that is cut the end off and we're sorted. We're back to where we need to be. And then we're effectively using the weapon or the type of weapon that we're supposed to be using for that particular set. In terms of the rest of the weapon, then the other adjustment you can simply make is shift down and use the sticks appropriately. Adjust your technique accordingly to the length of the sticks so you can start hitting and moving accordingly as per Kempo's syllabus and prescribed techniques. So that's the first thing about these, is using the stick to that length. Again, the stick is a lever overall. Your wrist is the fulcrum. You are the fulcrum ultimately when you were using this. But again, in this case, what we should be looking out for is, are we choking up on the weapon due to the fact that we just didn't bother making our weapons the right size? Or are we adjusting our technique because this is a ranged weapon? Again, if I have a stick and it is between me and my opponent, I want to make sure that I'm keeping that distance until I decide to bridge that distance. And again, this is where, from the Filipino martial arts side of things, you do guard some of your stick, and that can be used for trapping, that can be used for punching, that can be used for hammer striking, puño striking, as it's known in Filipino martial arts. Puño being here, puño being the wrist in Spanish, essentially. So again, when we're using these things, when we're doing it, we need to keep in mind why we're doing it. So if it's because the stick is not short enough, that's not a good enough why. Extend your technique or figure out why better to use it. Now, again, I'm not saying that there aren't reasons why you would use this, as I've said. There are some things like, if this was swordsmanship and we were talking about a katana on my wrist, this could be preventative of someone grabbing or stopping me from drawing my weapon. There are techniques in, some of the sword arts out there, for katana in particular, where the end of the sword or the handle of the sword is used as a means of trapping a wrist, which can then be used to slash, strike, or do whatever comes from there. But we're not really using this like a katana. And again, we're not necessarily using it in that way. So it's not to say that it can't have applications, and it certainly doesn't have applications. It is more to say that, are we really using it in that terms for those applications? If not, we should probably be adjusting to the more suitable application that we want to do, or the more suitable interpretation of what we're trying to do. So that's the first part about how we hold the stick, or more importantly, where we hold the stick. The second part then is about grip. And one of the other things that I've seen out there is teaching warm-ups for sticks. And again, teaching warm-ups for sticks is rotating the wrist. Yes, that is absolutely a valid thing. You're going to use your wrist a lot. You're going to use other joints a lot in your actual stick work as you're moving and as you're flowing. But one of the things that I have seen done is finger and thumb, or index finger and thumb, during the spins. And you're just going to let your wrist spin like this and let it go between your finger and thumbs. Now, straight away, that is a risk of disarmament when you are essentially in a technical fight, a sparring match, whatever it might be. If you have warmed yourself up and trained yourself at a basic level, that every time you turn that stick along the outside of your wrist or the inside of your wrist, you are going to open 3 of your fingers and loosen your grip to do that. And the problem with that is, if it's hit, if it's spot by anyone who knows what they're doing, or doesn't and just gets lucky and hits you, you are essentially risking losing that stick immediately from impact. So that's not something we want to happen. That's definitely not something you would want to practice or build in, that every time you move your stick, it's suddenly very loose. And particularly if you're even just doing a warm-up of circles like so, the issue that we face is, in doing so, it's actually really not very secure, and it's not a good line. The stick is actually wavering a lot here, which is not something that you want to build in either. You want clean strikes, clean angles, and you want to make sure that you're able to deliver on those angles. So again, things to watch out for. The stick is representative in most Filipino martial arts of a blade. So again, the line of my knuckles would determine the line of my stick in terms of how I would slash with that blade, and so on. So again, on the backhand line of my knuckles, front hand line or forehand line of my knuckles. And this is part of the high X video that I would have put out a few weeks back as well. So again, when we're looking at this, we are talking about how our wrist functions, and we're also talking about our grip being part of keeping our stick moving in a fluid way, but also in a controlled manner, to the point where we can now start moving our wrist more. And again, as I'm moving, as I'm flexing my wrist, at no point am I letting my fingers completely loose. But what I am doing is I am keeping my fingers not white knuckle. That's not what we want. I am keeping my fingers, flexible, able to move, soft when needed, but then rigid once I have my next strike as well. So again, grip is a really important thing. And always treat your warm-ups exactly like you should treat your actual technique as well. If you're training your warm-ups with, inadequacies or weaknesses in them, they're going to translate into your more practical application as well. It's the same way that if I want to warm up my shoulders, I'm not going to just move at the wrist or move at the elbow. I'm going to follow the full range of motion for that shoulder to make sure that I'm actually doing what I need to do. Likewise, in doing so, I'm not actually warming up my wrist here too much. I'm rotating my wrist, but there's no real, full-on warm-up here happening. From here, I'm using the full range of motion, and I'm also improving the flexibility of my wrist in order to be able to do a lot of these stick movements. And once that's working, then I can start using other parts of my body to back that up and to further enhance the striking that we're doing. So 2 things, again, just for the purposes of this video. And as I said, if this was a long one, thanks for sticking with me. Hopefully you pulled something from it. And if you did, there's more to come. So make sure you subscribe. So 2 things. Where you hold a stick. Be mindful of why you're holding a stick in a particular place. It's not to say that you can't use the stick in a particular way with that length on it, but you could be looking at essentially, you're doing it for the wrong reasons again. In terms of your grip then, just be mindful that if you're spinning your stick or rotating your stick to be more accurate, you are not letting it fling through your fingers because it looks cool and batony and twirly and everything else that comes with it. This is great for dexterity. There are uses for twirling, etc. But when you're actually swinging your stick and rotating from your wrist, the last thing you want is to hit someone at that point when your fingers are already open. You have no power and you certainly have no control. So when it hits that person, it's going to do more damage. Keep your fingers closed, not clenched. But then when you hit the person, make sure you clench.